Dallas, the Ron Engelman Show.
My name is Ron Engelman on Hot Talk KGBS. Now listen carefully. There are a lot of people on the line right now.
Ron told me that the Branch Davidians usually gathered to listen to his program. And it dawned on me, well, if they're listening, I could talk directly to David Koresh. I decided that I should call my associate, Dr. James Tabor, at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, because James also had studied apocalyptic groups.
What Arnold and I began to think was the possibility of causing David to rethink or maybe consider that there's another way to resolve this.
I have Dr. Tabor on the line and I have Dr. Arnold on the line talking about the 7 seals. Good morning. How are you, Ron?
And what we began to suggest is that David write a book and reveal the 7 seals. And with his infamous attention that he was getting from the news media, his message would finally go out.
See, David certainly got the attention of the world, but nobody has clearly heard yet what he's saying, I don't think. Well, I think you're right, Jim.
It was a gamble. It was a shot in the dark.
Today, looking more accepted.
But Koresh did listen to the program and began to sense that this was part of God's will.
On April 14th, David sends out a letter. He says, the waiting period is over. I've been told by God that I'm to write the message in a book. And when this book is finished, I will come out.
Make sure that these things get in the proper hands. You know, they have to go to these 2 scholars. This is not a book to be sold.
For David, this was an awesome thing because he'd never been allowed to reveal to the world his whole message, and now he thought he could do it.
So I can go on paper here. It says that David Koresh told me that as soon as he finishes this manuscript, the 7 seals,
I'll be splitting out of this place. I'm so sick of MREs. Lock, stock, and barrel it. It's going to blow your socks off.
I asked him straight out, I said, David, how long is this going to take? And he says, oh, it won't take very long at all. I said, David, it took well over 600 years to write the Bible. He said, no more than 2 days per seal. So David starts writing with Judy Schneider doing the typing.
Can you tell me how the seals are coming?
I'm working on them and
I think we got from Steve that you feel you'd finish with the first seal.
well, actually, I'm starting to finish up the 2nd seal now.
So we talked to Steve Schneider, and Steve says, I do the reviewing, because David only has a 9th grade education. He doesn't spell very well. We said, Steve, do you hear what you're saying? How ludicrous this is. You're telling us that the Son of God, the creator of heaven and earth, can't spell?
The legal things were worked out. The exit plan was worked out. He had written the first seal and agreed to send it out. So that weekend, we were ecstatically happy.
People had the question, are they going to allow him to finish his manuscript? How long is this manuscript going to take?
I never thought he was going to surrender. It had become pretty evident he was going to just keep stalling.
We all thought that the FBI was waiting for David to complete the seals and everyone would come out peacefully.
But nobody had any idea what was happening behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. We know from the official report, Janet Reno was never told about David's plan to surrender. She was told, the guy's never going to come out. He's suicidal. He's crazy. And then she was told, there's a good chance he'll start abusing the children.
On the evening of the 18th, I get a call from the on-scene commander, and he said, you need to get back here. And I said, why? What's up? And he said, we're going in.
At this point, we're not negotiating. We're saying come out. Come out with your hands up. This matter is over.
want to do an assault. That's what I trained to do. I wanted him to pay for his crimes, for having murdered those 4 ATF agents.
I put the call in to the compound, and Steve Snyder picks up the phone. Hey, Byron, how are you?
I need to advise you of something that's very important. Can you understand me? Okay. We're in the process of placing tear gas into the building. This is not an assault. We are not entering the building. Do you understand that? This is not an assault. Okay, they hung up the phone. Exit the compound now and follow the instructions of the individuals who will talk to you from the Bradleys.
The whole building starts shaking. I'm thinking, what the heck's that? Is this an earthquake or what?
David, you have had your 15 minutes of fame. It's time to leave the building. Exit the compound now.
But insert this boom into the building.
I want to weigh in on what's happening here pertaining to the scene. Even though all this had become public knowledge pertaining to public domain, I felt like that rather than see the actual things that was going on, that a person could take a different perspective by hearing the things that was going on versus seeing the things and hearing the things. The individual, let me back this up just for a second real quick. He just got through talking a while ago. His name is, hang on. David Koresh hung up the phone. This is at 6:02 in the morning. The tank is already rolling around, poking holes in the side of the building. Clive Doyle. It was Clive Doyle and one other Branch Davidian member that after they had done their spread in jail, which was about 18 and a half years out of 20, I got to sit down with these individuals after me staying on the compound for about 3 days and 3 nights. I set up a tent out on the prairie there, and they let me interview them. We went to a Cracker Barrel one morning, and I got to talking to both of them about the details and everything that had occurred. And I could tell by talking to Mr. Doyle and the other individual that these people was so far out in left field that they was still 20-something years later idolizing David Koresh. Now, the investigator a while ago spoke up about that David Koresh couldn't spell good and he's supposed to be the son of God. Well, you know, if David Koresh was a true Christian of God, he would know that the King James Version Bible teaches that in the last days that there would be many false prophets and many false Christs, and that there would be many people that would come saying that they was basically the Lord, knowing that all they was basically an imposter. David knew that. The individual, the main guy that was involved with the ATF siege that was talking a while ago, I don't forgot his name, he knew it too as well. Because anybody that knows that it took almost 600 years to write the Bible knows that that it specifically talks about in the words of Red that that in the last days that there would be many people that would come forth pretending to be a Messiah. Matter of fact, they just had an event that recently happened over in Africa somewhere, where about 50 or 60 people basically done the same kind of ordeal of Jim Jones, drinking a bunch of poison or something, or shooting themselves or something. I don't know what was going on there, but it was another ongoing scenario similar towards what other occult leaders have done towards talking their followers into basically checking out. A few years ago, they had another ordeal out in California that everybody was wearing white Converse shoes, waiting on a meteor to come by that took a bunch of pills or ate a bunch of poison or something, and they found them. I think it was about 15 or 16, 17, something like that. They found them all dead. They was waiting for the comet to come. They was going to get on the comet. But it's just remarkable that whenever they're talking about these things, April 19th, 1993, of the 51-day standoff, they did not explain per detail what they was actually putting in the building pertaining to the tear gas. They just told everybody that it was tear gas. Well, there's 5 different types of tear gases that ordinarily the federal agencies can make up. 2 of those agencies is never supposed to be used inside a building, and out of the 5, 3 of them is never supposed to be used on women and children, because there's different compounds that you can put into the gas that will basically make it lethal. And to this day, they still have not fully disclosed just exactly what the compound base was and what type of tear gas that they used. I still believe that the candles and the lanterns that the women was having to use down in the lower part of the building, where it was completely, totally dark because electricity had been off the whole time, I personally believe that it took a while for the gas to seep down where the actual quarters was, where they was staying, where all the food and the resources was. And once that gas got down there, that's all it took, and it turned it into a towering inferno that the United States government basically turned that into some sort of a barbecue that day. And they knew, the federal agencies knew what the dangers of that gas was. Besides that, it could have been somebody that fired a shot, a gun. It could have been a misfire on one of the tanks. Any and all the above. Matter of fact, Clive and his partner believed that there was a fire station, a lookout tower, probably within, give or take, about, well, they talked about a quarter of a mile. And if you know anything at all about guns, you know that a quarter of a mile shot ain't too much of a challenge for a sharpshooter, especially if they're on a stable area and they've got the proper equipment. Well, there was a propane tank to the side of that building, and they kind of thought that somebody had struck a valve on the propane tank. I'm talking about a big, like 2,000 gallon propane tank, and it was spewing out gas, and that was the forerunner that actually caused the explosion. Because according to them, the wind was blowing in the right direction to blow all that propane gas off into that building. To get somebody from the FBI or the ATF to admit that they shot a valve on a propane tank and it started releasing gas out into the open, to get them to admit to that would probably be like pulling hen's teeth. That's just like to get them to tell you the truth towards what kind of compound that they use in that tear gas is going to be like pulling hen's teeth. But the bottom line is this, pertaining to the Branch Davidians. Yes, they was all whacked in a way that they needed some sort of counseling or mental treatment in some sort of way. I don't know if it was chemicals or what, but that they was whacked to the degree that they literally thought that David Koresh was some sort of a Jesus Christ superstar. In the meantime, the media didn't tell you about the gas, didn't tell you about the propane tank that Clive swore by, that got bursted. And in the meantime, the media never told you what led to all this, which was the ATF that had set up shop across the road from the Branch Davidians, that lured them into their friendship and then lured them into buying high capacity military magazine guns, or buying guns that could be converted over to a high capacity military gun. And they started making money by going to these gun shows and converting these guns over. You keep in mind that Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee are three of the leading states that hold dear to their automatic firearms almost as much, if not more so, than they do any other aspect of their lives. In other words, out of those three states, you're sure enough dealing with a Yahoo type state of people that if you try to persuade them that they're not supposed to have any guns, even though it's a Bible Belt area, you're gonna have better luck in pulling hen's teeth than you are talking a group of people out of their weaponry. You're not going to do it. And I don't know, you probably never will do it, because the NRA is really entrenched in a lot of these southern states that's considered the deep state, that like I said, it's basically a bunch of people that's brainwashed.
This matter is over.
I want to do an assault. That's what I trained to do. I wanted him to pay for his crimes, for having murdered those 4 ATF agents.
I put the call into the compound, and Steve Snyder picks up the phone. Hey, Byron, how are you?
I need to advise you of something that's very important. Can you understand me? Okay. We're in the process of placing tear gas into the building. This is not an assault. We are not entering the building. Do you understand that? This is not an assault.
It is not an assault. If that's not an assault, by ripping and tearing holes into the side of the building and pumping endless amount of tear gas into that building, knowing that there's women and children and people in that building, if that is not an assault, I will kiss your tail and give you 30 minutes to draw a crowd. If you can take somebody and put them in prison for an endless amount of time because that person assaulted a post office by taking a rock and knocking out or trying to break one of the post office windows, and the police catches them and he's standing in front of a federal judge, because a post office is a federal building. You can't tell me that doing what they done that day was not an assault. See how the law enforcement agencies, they themselves is out of tune with reality. They themselves are lying whenever it comes to different things that they was embarked into towards what was going on. The whole thing was just nothing but a free-for-all from day one, whenever they decided that they was going to set up shop out in front of them and lure them all into doing something that was considered a monetary financial charge pertaining to a group of people that bought some guns, that because they was an assault military type gun, they was supposed to have paid a certain particular extra tax on them guns, and because they didn't, that gave the feds basically the right to get a judge to agree on a no-knock warrant from sunup to sundown, and that's whenever they went ahead and done it. Now, another thing that they don't tell you is that on the first day of the siege, is that their plans of going in and raiding the compound was already spoiled, because somebody had caught on that the raid was fixing to happen. In addition, for the group that was set up for 9 months across the road, ATF, that David Koresh left the compound at any given time, going to the restaurants and going to Lowe's and going and picking up supplies at different areas, that if they was that dead set in wanting to arrest David Koresh, they could have done so without a big Yahoo type city. They didn't want a civil arrest on one man. They wanted to turn it into a Yahoo type city. The feds, the FBI, the ATF, all of them that was out there, they was eating this up, especially once the media got involved after the Ruby Ridge deal and also after the first attack on the Twin Towers. But if you pay very close attention, the seals pertaining to the Bible was the big factor in what that they had been preaching, teaching, and basically eating day and night. And obviously they had tapped into something that they could not control their emotions over, and they had also tapped into something that was very, very misleading, because the Bible teaches us that if you hear of somebody that claims to be the Lord, do not go and seek that person out towards thinking that they're really and truly the Lord Jesus Christ, or a reincarnation of the Lord Jesus Christ, because Jesus said it ain't going to happen. Jesus is not going to come back to the planet in the same form that he come the first time. He'll come back to the planet. As a matter of fact, the Holy Spirit is constantly at work towards going back and forth to the planet, well, towards gathering up people's souls and going up into heaven. It's a constant workforce there going on. But whenever Jesus comes back, he ain't coming back in the fleshly sense, and he ain't coming back in the form of a lamb. He's coming back in the form of a lion sitting on the right hand of the God. That's how the Lord Jesus Christ is going to come back. As far as I'm concerned, that they were so far out of whack, kind of like Jim Jones or the people that had the Converse tennis shoes, and there was another group out in Washington State, and there was another group up in New York City, in addition to the groups that's been all over the world of people luring people in to this type of deception. But this was a total mess up from the day one, whenever they knew that whenever they went in there to supposedly serve a warrant and gather up a group of people out of there, they knew that the type of artillery fire that they was dealing with was lethal, and they also knew that if their plans had been spoiled, that now they was onto them, they should have retracted and retrieved from the shakedown. But instead, they still wanted to do the big Yahoo thing, and that's exactly what they got. They got the Yahoo thing.
They hung up the phone.
They hung up the phone.
Next Exit the compound now and follow the instructions of the individuals who will talk to you from the Bradleys.
The whole building starts shaking. I'm thinking, what the heck's that? Is this an earthquake or what?
David, you have had your 15 minutes of fame. It's time to leave the building. Exit the compound now.
They insert this boom into the building and release the gas. We all put gas masks on, but the masks were too big for the children, so they could not wear a gas mask.
You will not be harmed. Follow all instructions.
The gas supplies a number of irritants. Just touching to the skin can be extremely painful.
Come out with your hands up. Carry nothing.
There's a shot of them quite literally ripping off the corner of the building.
There was also other rounds they were firing through walls and windows.
I fired in the range of 93 gas rounds.
So those things would come flying through the window, they'd stick in the walls, you could hear them hissing.
They really gassed us from 6 o'clock to about 12. 6 hours worth of gassing.
You know, I'm sure that was pretty frightening for the people inside.
You think so? Do you really think so? I'm going to tell you how frightening it was to not just the people outside, but to that neighborhood in general, because of the way that the feds come in there and basically killed them people. After or during the time that I was out there doing my investigation work, after that I'd already talking to Mr. Doyle and his friend per detail the things that was said and done, I decided to take it upon myself towards drawing out a map within a 5-mile radius, 2.5 miles to the north, 2.5 miles to the south, 2.5 miles to the east, and 2.5 miles to the west. And I went individually down roads, knocking on people's doors, asking them what went on and what they felt about it after that time period had elapsed. First of all, probably 80% of the people that was within that 5-mile radius, every one of them had fences and gates in front of their houses. That was one of the first things that I noticed, is that the majority of the people out there, way out in the country now, had chain link fence and steel bar type gates to where you could not get in unless the door was open. Out of the 80%, the days that I was out there investigating, going to these people's homes, I'm going to say probably a third of them was confined and locked, but the other 2/3 wasn't. So basically I was playing with about maybe 40 to 50% of the people that may have been available to talk to me if the gate was open. Whenever I would pull up into their driveway and knock on their door and discuss with them what I needed to discuss with them, 80% of the people that once they identified what I was wanting told me to leave and get off their property immediately. It wasn't but just a few people that opened up because they were so frightened of what the United States government had done down there that actually openly talked to me about what had occurred. So whenever they say we believe that it was probably a frightening situation to the people in that building, no, it was a frightening situation probably within a 20 to maybe even a 50-mile radius towards what was going on. This became the talk of the town. It was so predominant that even children was going to school and looking forward to taking the information that they had gathered up that night out of the news and discussing it with their classmates. In other words, this was being discussed over the water fountain. This was being discussed in offices. This was being discussed in gymnasiums. This was being discussed with farmers. This was being discussed with ranchers. This was being discussed with a great deal of people. It was not just the people in that building that was frightened. And whenever I drove around and I realized how many people had locked gates, locked fences, proof was in the pudding of just exactly how frightening that community had become just outside of Waco, Texas.
The only time I took the gas mask off, my eyes were burning.
Through intelligence that we've gathered, the first seal has not been completed yet. It was strictly a stalling tactic. They had no intention of ever coming out. Yes, ma'am, follow up.
I wanted to find out what was going on. David looked up at me and said, "Do you know how to use one of these?" And he handed the grenade to me. He was expecting an all-out onslaught.
We were in the chapel, and we heard somebody yell out, "The building's on fire."
I see white smoke, and I immediately think, wow, that's weird. And then I'm like, that's a fire.
It looks like smoke is coming out from several windows now.
We had a Davidian sitting in the U.S. Marshal's office, and I said, are they coming out? And she said, no way. They will never come out.
This is not what the FBI had intended. They do not want to burn people inside that building. This is horrible.
Every Sunday.
Check this out. I mean, it was horrible. But immediately the United States government, once they found out a little bit more detail, it took them a few days of the surviving people that did get out of the building, and Clive Doyle was one of them. One of the first things that they wanted to promote, they wanted to use the children as an scapegoat or an umbrella to justify their actions by telling everybody that David Koresh was in there having open habitual sex with not only the men's wives, but also a few of the men's daughters, putting David Koresh in the category of not just being a nut, but also putting him in the category of being a pedophile, a overly sex deranged individual that now was having sex with, I guess, as little as 14-year-old girls. So that was what the federal government pushed out to the world, that made the rest of the world say, oh, if that's what was going on, well, then they had it coming to them. It was justifiable. Oh, really? You got almost 30 children in there, and they deserve to die this way? Thing about it is, the ATF and the FBI had no idea that some of the hanky-panky sexual activity was going on. They had no idea. The primary source and the reason for them going in there pertaining to a shakedown of a group of people that was buying a bunch of military hardware, that was expecting the earth to swallow them up or the sky to fall, and basically the end of the world. That is the stuff that they don't tell the general public about, how that they lured them people in buying them guns, and then used the pretense similar towards what they went after Al Capone up in Chicago towards invading income tax invasion. That's what they used to get a judge to sign off on a warrant. Like I said, they had no idea that the children the sexual pedophile stuff was going on until later, and that was one of the first things that they wanted to put out into the public, is that this is what was going on, and because of it, it was justifiable. None of this was justifiable. If they would have hung on just a few more days later, they'd done already come to the point that they was out of food. I mean, if you're going to wait 51 days, why cut it off now? They used the concept that they was afraid that David Koresh was going to start killing the children or abusing the children, in which they had no idea about the sexual oriented part of it. But they was using that to Janet Reno to say, okay, go after them. I personally believe that long about the 40th day, the whole ordeal changed from a rescue mission to a doomsday mission, and from the 40th day up into the 51st day, they know at that point in time that those people, they wasn't going to come out, and that they was doomed. They was doomed. And of course, they was taking the orders from the Oklahoma building, Muriel building there in downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And that's whenever I figured out the theory of the second bomb, and what caused the bomb to be in the building to begin with was that a group of people brought dynamite, explosives, into the Muriel building that was supposed to have been used on the Branch Davidians. Somebody sat and thought that out, and said, you know what, we can't do it this way. If we do, it's going to be a tattletale sign that we have purposely destroyed these people's lives. So they still hung on to the dynamite after it already been fixed up and stuff. But that's whenever they come up with another theory towards gassing the place. That guy said that they used over 90 canisters in a 6-hour period, and that tank was steadily being filled up with gas and steadily pumping more and more gas into that building while them children was in there. While them children was in that building.
I'm in the chapel. I'm trying to breathe through my gas mask. I heard a call from upstairs and saying, the building's on fire.
This should be a definite determining factor. You should see some people come out of this building. Okay, we got a man on the roof coming out, as you can see.
The way that wind was blowing, that probably gusts up to 40 miles an hour. It's really going to consume this building. It's going to burn like, no tomorrow. I mean, it's just going to be embers in a half hour.
You can just see the black smoke from behind us. Now it is up to David Koresh, if he is indeed...
Thing about it is, whenever the fire started on the one end, it also started on the other end. And you can tell by looking at the pictures that within 2 minutes after the flames had started, all the metal on top of the rest of the building, because this was a big building, this was a huge 2-story building, I'm going to say 200 by 150 foot wide, by 200, maybe even more than 200 foot. A lot of wood and metal was in the building, and you could actually sit back and see as the fire is escaping out of one end of the building and the fire is escaping on the other end of the building. At that time, the metal was literally giving out gases because of the heat up underneath the metal. It was that intense. It was that quick. Within a matter of 2 minutes, that whole building was on fire. So to think that somebody started this with a 5-gallon can of gas, it would have been impossible for anybody to have done that like that. It was the tear gas. It was all the tear gas that was put into that building that turned that building into a towering inferno.
Who he says he is, he will not let his people sit in there and burn to death.
I couldn't believe that parents would allow their children to remain inside there.
At that point, the chapel's alight. So I jump out the building. Once I get out, I could hear people inside the building screaming. I could hear what sounded to me like gunshots. Flames pouring out of the back door. Where was I going to go? I looked up to see an annex to the water tower. It's made of concrete. It will not burn. I just took off as fast as I could, ran into that little room.
This heat was so oppressive, it was like it just pushed me down on the floor. And I'm rolling around, basically talking to God, always saying, God, if you're going to do a miracle, you better hurry because it's getting hot in here.
They said something about we couldn't believe that David Koresh couldn't get the people out of there in time. It was impossible because the whole building within a matter of 2 to 5 minutes was now nothing but a towering inferno. The whole building. Them people was trapped at that point in time. They couldn't get out of there. And if the truth be known, the reason why some of them was actually shooting each other, because that was an easier way to die than it would have been just to sit there and basically melt or catch a fire and die that way. It was awful. The blazes now has consumed the whole building to the point that the top has fallen in and it's nothing but a big ball of red induced fire.
It was almost unbearable to breathe because the temperature of the air would burn your throat. Well, I had that pistol with me, and the sole purpose of carrying that pistol was to end my own life.
Now I get back on the mic and I'm pleading with them.
Lead your people out.
And
Don't be a destroyer, be a savior.
the instructions go to please go to just begging. I said, David, you don't want to end this like this.
You have some precious young kids in there. Please, David, it is time to bring this to an end.
I was watching the TV, and I said, God, you're not going to wipe them out, are you? And he said to me, not in an audible voice or anything, yes, he says they're going to be slaughtered, just like it says in Ezekiel 9. And I wept.
And the silence was just devastating there in that command center.
I asked this Davidian in our office, your daughter is still in there, isn't she? And she said, yes, she is. And God, I wish I was in there with them.
I was in a kind of jail, and as I watched that, there was a sense of defiance and not coming out. You're not going to break our faith through gassing us or trying to burn us.
No one is getting out of that fire. They are determined to do God's will and serve that purpose.
As I watched the fire, I felt that if I yielded to emotion, I probably would have died as well.
We slowly start to see a couple Davidians trickle out, and I started giving them commands to get their hands in the air, drop any weapons that they had.
But that's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 now maybe. But where are the other 91 or so? We believe 95 were there.
I jumped at the hole, all the skin's rolling off my hands. It's not blistering, it's kind of just rolling off. And my jacket's melting. And I looked back over my shoulder, and the hole I just came through is just a mass of flames, and I thought, nobody's coming out of there now.
When Doyle came out, I was yelling at him, keep your hands in the air and where are the kids? And as he approached me, I made it clear to him that he needed to keep his hands in the air or I'd blow his effing head off. This is a guy who left his daughter in there to burn to death.
I wasn't sure where my daughter was. You're hoping for a miracle.
He left his daughter in there to burn. You see how they're trying to turn it around and making them look like that they're the monsters, the Davidians, instead of the ATF and the federal agents that actually planned this out. Well, he just left his daughter in there. No, he didn't just leave his daughter in there. They was all in there, and like he just got through saying, he had no idea where she was because it was a big building. It was a lot of stuff going on. Probably some part in the morning, 2 or 3 hours, she may have been right around Doyle, but then again, there may have been 2 or 3 hours in that same day that she may have been down in the lower part of the building where all the children was, or maybe she was doing something else. I mean, they had responsibilities in there. They was caged up like a bunch of rats. And to think that they turned that building into a towering inferno and then tried to justify their actions, to this day, still makes me quiver of knowing that the United States government done that right in front of everybody's eyes and then tried to justify it by saying, oh, he left his daughter in there. He's a monster. No, the man barely got out of there alive. Skin was coming off of his hands. He was burning. There was only a few of them that come out. The rest of them perished.
This woman comes out on the front side of the building, and she turned around and went back into the burning structure. So I had to physically pick her up and get her back to the Bradley.
Ruth Riddle, she's identifiable. I remember her clothing's kind of smoking, and she has that disc in her pocket.
The truly sad part here is the children. We know there's probably 17 children still inside that compound.
Watching everybody you know die, when you know that dying is the right thing to do, is actually a good thing. I should have died too.
What was the point of me being out here? I would have been very happy to have died with them.
All right, it just gave a time frame of 12:45. The building caught fire at 12:06. At 12:45, let me back it up here to look at it one more time. At 12:45, the fire had now started diminishing. All the walls and the top had completely collapsed, and basically, they was dead. In a 40-minute period, that whole building turned into a towering inferno, and now it's basically turning into cinder, a few ashes and fire still going. In other words, it was over. The incineration was over. At 12:45, in 40 minutes, less than 40 minutes, that whole structure that was every bit the size of a school, or maybe even a small hospital, was gone. So you can't tell me that that tear gas in that building was not the primary source that caused the death of all them people.
I stayed in that room until the fire died down. And after about 3 hours, I came out waving my white flag, which is really just a white grain sack.
And 50 guns pointed at him at once. I was told to go in and search where he'd been, and I found a handgun, some loaded magazines, and I think a grenade. So, he could have caused us some problems.
That almost looks like a couple of agents escorting someone out.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what it looks like to us here.
I should not have come out, and I should have died in the fire.
They just came in and told us that our parents had just killed themselves and committed suicide. I didn't believe that my dad would do that. So I went and sat under a coffee table and curled up in a ball for like 2 days.
They got Heather on the phone.
Now that same girl that was talking just then, by looking at her in the picture, she looked to be maybe 12, 13 years old, 10, 11, 12 years old at the time.
She's just crying and telling me that her daddy was dead. And I couldn't go see her. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't comfort my own child.
I said I wasn't going to shed tears, because that's what I was all designed to do.
Well, he's shedding them now. The black guy, I don't forgot now, I think he was from Jamaica or somewhere. There was several people there, nationalist people there that come from different parts of the planet. I mean, this was an organization.
I walked outside to get some fresh air after I terminated the negotiation broadcast.
That guy that's talking right now, he was the main perpetrator that masterminded all this. And I remember distinctively, probably about, I guess it was about a year or two, may have been a little longer than that, after that I went and done what I done in 2009. After he realized that the people in general was taking a different concept of all this, especially once they realized that it was a whole mission of nothing but an entrapment, luring mission from these officers. They started having a different perspective about him, and because of it, he was complaining, well, they're blaming this on me, they're blaming this on me. I wonder why. I truly wonder why. Not.
That marked the end of 51 straight days of negotiation efforts by flipping that switch. 9 Branch Davidians came out. One of them took the time to bring out a child, but one of them brought out a dog. A dog.
Once more, that main perpetrator that done that is trying to throw the blame or the guilt off on the people that was basically being burned up within a matter of seconds. Couple of minutes, it was over with. I just imagine, first of all, it was a miracle. It was a miracle that anybody escaped. And to think that the way that turned into a towering inferno because of all that gas in there, the only reason why that you would have escaped would have been if you would have been next to a window or a doorway and you had time to actually refrain from what was going on and actually head out of the building. You didn't have time to go gather up people. You didn't have time to think that thing out. They wasn't expecting for the building to catch a fire like that. They wasn't expecting for a siege to happen with all that tear gas being pumped off into that building. Once more, that lieutenant or whoever he was, I don't even know if he was an ATF or FBI agent, he's trying to make it look like that they're the ones that caused, that they're the monsters and they're the ones that caused their own deaths. Is that wacky or what? That's wacky. That is sick, is what it is, of an individual that's in denial because now everything had flubbed up from the front end to the back end of the whole shakedown. And now this is the results of it towards all these people dying.
It was not our intention that this compound be burned down. I can't tell you the shock and the horror that all of us felt when we saw those flames coming out there.
You're lying. You're lying. You're lying. You knew by filling that building up with tear gas the way that you did what the odds was of it turning out to be the very results of what it turned out to be.
It was, oh my God, they're killing themselves.
No, they're not killing themselves. You had killed them. You keep in mind, for 51 days, those people was having large lights, blinding them at night, no electricity, all kinds of weird, crazy sounding music towards basically psychological warfare, and they was being tormented for the whole 51 days. So to think that their minds was going to be acting reasonably, especially whenever the towering inferno basically caught the whole building on fire at one time, it's foolish thinking. And for them to say that they committed suicide, knowing good and well that it was them that poured that building full of tear gas. And at the time, because I remember it distinctly because I was working at the time in 1993 for Jerry Smith's Body Shop in Milan, Tennessee. At the time, the vast majority of the people swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. Especially 2 or 3 days into that, whenever the federal government started talking about pedophile and sexual behavior, they just jumped all over that. Well, this is the way we're going to get out of this little tight that we're in. We'll just convince the American people that there was children involved and that David Koresh was having sex with all of them. First of all, if he was having sex with any of them, it was wrong. But even if they did know that he was having sex with children, they didn't deserve that, especially the children. And then we'll hear FBI agents and other agents get on TV today, within the past week, 2 weeks, a month, and they'll use the Waco Branch Davidians along with what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 2 years to the date with Timothy McVeigh and Nichols. They'll use that as a stepping stone of trying to prove that there is a major uprising being planned